It started with a panicked phone call and a pregnant mother who didn't return home. By nightfall, an entire family had vanished without a trace, until the father's calm demeanor unraveled into one of the most horrifying family murder confessions in modern American history. The story of Chris Watts isn't just about murder. It's about deception, cold calculation, and a terrifying portrait of evil hiding behind a perfect smile. To the outside world, Chris and Shanann Watts appeared to be living the American dream. They lived in a spacious home in Frederick, Colorado, with their 2 daughters, 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste, affectionately nicknamed Cece. Shanann was 15 weeks pregnant with a baby boy they planned to name Nico. She was vibrant, social, and successful in her work with a health supplements company. Chris, a quiet man, worked as an operator at Anadarko Petroleum. Their social media was full of cheerful posts, family vacations, and declarations of love. But behind the curated pictures and smiling faces, a nightmare was brewing. On August 13, 2018, at around 1:40 a.m., Shanann returned home from a business trip in Arizona. Her friend and colleague, Nicole Atkinson, had dropped her off. But the next morning, Shanann missed a doctor's appointment and wasn't answering calls or texts. Alarmed, Nicole went to the Watts residence around noon. She rang the bell, knocked, and called, but no answer. The police were summoned for a welfare check. Chris Watts arrived shortly after, oddly composed. He allowed officers into the home. Shanann's purse, phone, and keys were still there. Her car, with the children's car seats, sat in the garage. But Shanann, Bella, and Celeste were gone. Nothing looked disturbed. Surveillance footage showed Shanann arriving home. Then nothing. A neighbor who had a security camera pointed at the street offered the footage to police. The video showed Chris backing his truck into the driveway and loading something large into the vehicle early that morning, something he claimed was just tools for work. But as the officer watched, the neighbor noticed Chris was acting strangely, pacing, nervous, talking too much. When Chris left, the neighbor turned to the officer and said, "He's not acting right. He's hiding something." Chris did interviews pleading for his family's return. On TV, he appeared sorrowful, begging Shanann to come home with the girls. But something was off. His eyes didn't match his words. His voice wavered in strange moments, and he never shed a real tear. The world watched with growing suspicion. Behind the scenes, investigators had already started to suspect foul play. They confronted Chris with inconsistencies in his story. When asked to take a polygraph, he agreed and failed. That's when the mask began to slip. As police dug deeper, a crucial piece surfaced. Chris had been having an affair with a coworker named Nicole Kessinger. They had been dating for weeks, and he told her he was in the process of separating from Shanann. They exchanged love notes, went on dates, and talked about a future together. Investigators believed this affair was the motive. Chris wanted a new life, free from the responsibilities of fatherhood and marriage. Faced with mounting pressure and a failed polygraph, Chris finally cracked. At first, he told investigators that Shanann had killed the girls after he asked for a separation, and in a fit of rage, he killed her. But the truth was far more disturbing. Chris eventually admitted that he had killed Shanann in their bed by strangling her, then wrapped her body in a sheet. As Bella walked into the room and asked what was wrong with Mommy, Chris loaded her and Celeste into his truck, placing their mother's body on the floorboard. He then drove nearly an hour to an oil field owned by his company. There, in a chilling act of brutality, he smothered Celeste with a blanket while Bella watched. Her last words were, "Daddy, no." Then he turned to Bella and did the same. He buried Shanann in a shallow grave and dropped his daughter's bodies into separate oil tanks, hoping their small bodies would dissolve in the crude oil, never to be found. Public outrage erupted across the country. The image of Chris Watts as the all-American dad shattered forever. On November 6, 2018, he pleaded guilty to 9 charges, including 3 counts of first-degree murder, in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. At sentencing, Shanann's family gave heartbreaking statements while Chris stood expressionless. The judge called the crime the most inhumane and vicious he had ever seen. Chris Watts was sentenced to 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus 84 additional years. He is currently serving his sentence at Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin. The Watts family tragedy remains one of the most disturbing true crime cases in recent memory, not just for the brutality, but for the cold-blooded premeditation behind it. Chris Watts destroyed an entire family for the illusion of freedom and a new romance. His daughter's final words, especially Bella's innocent plea, "Daddy, no," still echo in the minds of those who followed the case. Shanann's family continues to honor her memory by raising awareness about domestic violence and family annihilation. They want the world to remember Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and baby Nico, not for how they died, but for how they lived, full of life, love, and hope. Monsters don't always hide in the dark. Sometimes they wear a friendly smile, live next door, and tuck their kids in at night. The Chris Watts case is a haunting reminder that evil can be disturbingly ordinary, and that sometimes the person you trust the most is the one you should fear. It was the day after Christmas in 1996 when the festive cheer in the affluent Ramsey household in Boulder, Colorado, turned into a nightmare that would grip America for decades. A 6-year-old beauty queen, JonBenét Ramsey, vanished from her bed only to be found murdered in the basement of her own home hours later. A chilling ransom note, a panicked 911 call, and a trail of confusion, secrets, and suspicion unfolded in a case that remains one of the most haunting, unsolved mysteries in modern American history. This isn't just a murder story. It's a tale of innocence lost, trust betrayed, and a truth buried under layers of deception. December 25th, 1996, Boulder, Colorado. The Ramsey family, John, his wife Patsy, their 9-year-old son Burke, and their youngest JonBenét, had just returned home after a quiet Christmas dinner at a friend's house. Their Tudor-style home was grand, adorned with holiday decorations, and inside, the halls echoed with the laughter of children and the warmth of a family celebrating the season. JonBenét, a strikingly beautiful 6-year-old girl with blonde curls and sparkling blue eyes, had already lived a life that many adults hadn't. She was a child beauty queen, paraded across stages, dressed in glittering gowns, and crowned again and again. That night, like many before, she went to bed after the long day, her last night alive. At 5:52 a.m. on December 26th, Patsy Ramsey called 911 in a panicked voice. Her daughter was gone. She had discovered a strange 2.5-page ransom note on the kitchen staircase. It was addressed to John Ramsey and demanded $118,000 for JonBenét's safe return, a bizarrely specific amount that happened to match John's Christmas bonus from his job at Access Graphics. The note, written in oddly theatrical language, signed by a small foreign faction, instructed the Ramseys not to contact police or friends. But within minutes, the house was filled with law enforcement and family friends, compromising the crime scene in the critical early hours of the investigation. For nearly 8 hours, police and family searched the house, but it wasn't until 1:05 p.m. that John Ramsey, along with a family friend, stumbled upon something horrifying. In a little used basement room, behind a latch door, lay JonBenét's lifeless body. She was covered with a white blanket. Her wrists had been tied with cord, and there was duct tape over her mouth. A garrote made from a paintbrush handle and a cord was around her neck. Her skull had a fracture nearly 8 inches long, and she had been strangled. Yet there were no signs of forced entry into the home. Shockingly, the body was moved from the basement and carried upstairs by John Ramsey, a decision that further contaminated potential evidence. The Boulder Police Department quickly began to suspect the crime had been staged. There were inconsistencies in the ransom note. It was written with a pen and pad from the Ramseys' own house, and handwriting experts believed it was likely written by someone familiar with the family. There were no fingerprints on the note. Suspicion fell heavily on the Ramseys, but the parents insisted they were innocent and pointed to the possibility of an intruder. Still, critics questioned, why would a kidnapper leave such a long ransom note at the scene? Why would they kill the child and not take her? Why was there no sign of forced entry, no footprints in the snow? JonBenét's autopsy revealed troubling details. She had suffered both blunt force trauma and strangulation. There were signs of possible sexual abuse, both old and new, though this was disputed over the years. The presence of undigested pineapple in her stomach suggested she had eaten sometime after coming home, but the parents said they put her to bed immediately. Nearby, a bowl of pineapple was found on the kitchen table, with Burke's fingerprints on it, but he denied knowledge of the fruit. This small detail would become a strange centerpiece in the tangled timeline of events. Additionally, there was DNA evidence found in JonBenét's underwear, an unidentified male DNA that did not match any family member or known associate. This DNA would fuel theories of an outside attacker, even as police focused on those inside the house. As the news broke, JonBenét's face was everywhere. Pageants clips, smiling photos, glittery costumes. She became both a symbol of lost innocence and a media obsession. The story exploded across headlines, late-night television, and tabloids. Public opinion was divided. Some were convinced the parents were guilty, perhaps an accident covered up in panic. Others believed an intruder theory, or even more chillingly, that her older brother Burke might have harmed her in a fit of rage, and the parents covered it up. The Ramseys went on television, hiring private investigators and lawyers. They gave carefully crafted interviews. They even wrote a book. But they never stopped claiming their innocence. The intruder theory gained traction over the years. A few doors in the house were unlocked. A basement window was cracked and partially open, possibly offering an entry point. Some believed a stranger had sneaked in, perhaps targeting the family for ransom. Then there was John Mark Carr, a man who bizarrely confessed to the murder in 2006. He claimed to have been with JonBenét when she died, but his DNA didn't match, and his story quickly unraveled. He was dismissed as a disturbed fantasist. Meanwhile, handwriting experts largely agreed that Patsy Ramsey could not be excluded as the author of the ransom note. Yet there was never enough evidence for an arrest. Burke Ramsey was kept out of the media for years. He was only 9 at the time of JonBenét's murder. In 2016, 2 decades later, he broke his silence in a strange interview with Dr. Phil, smiling awkwardly, giving vague answers, and further fueling public speculation. Some experts theorized that Burke, possibly angry or jealous, may have struck his sister with a heavy object and that the parents covered up the crime. But there has never been hard evidence to support this theory. Burke has never been charged and vehemently denies any involvement. In 2008, the Boulder District Attorney announced that new, advanced DNA testing had cleared the Ramsey family, pointing to an unknown male. They were formally exonerated. But critics argued that the DNA could have been from contaminated clothing or packaging, not necessarily the killer. Despite advances in technology, no match has ever been found. The case remains officially unsolved. Nearly 3 decades have passed since JonBenét Ramsey's death. New detectives, new technologies, and countless documentaries have tried to crack the case. Yet the truth remains elusive. Was it a tragic accident covered up in panic? A deranged intruder who vanished without a trace? Or something more complex and hidden, locked within the walls of the Ramsey home? JonBenét would have been in her 30s today. Instead, her memory lives on through a crime scene frozen in time, a ransom note scribbled in desperation or deception, and a small girl whose voice was silenced far too soon. JonBenét's murder reshaped the public's view of child beauty pageants, sparked debates on forensic science, and left a legacy of distrust between law enforcement and media. It remains one of the most dissected and discussed true crime cases in history. And yet, as haunting as the details are, the most chilling fact remains. The killer of JonBenét Ramsey walks free. June 12, 1994. A brutal double murder in the wealthy neighborhood of Brentwood, Los Angeles. A trail of blood, a single glove, and a famous football star fleeing in a white Ford Bronco with helicopters swarming overhead. The man accused? Orenthal James O.J. Simpson, beloved NFL icon, movie star, and household name. What followed wasn't just a murder trial. It became the trial of the century, a media circus that exposed deep racial tensions in America and left the world asking one unforgettable question. Did he really do it? Nicole Brown Simpson was found just after midnight on June 13, 1994, slumped on the pathway outside her Los Angeles condo. Her ex-husband, O.J. Simpson, had a history of abuse, jealousy, and obsession with her, but nothing could prepare investigators for the horror they uncovered that night. Nicole had been stabbed multiple times, her throat slashed so deeply she was nearly decapitated. Nearby, 25-year-old Ron Goldman, a friend who had returned a pair of sunglasses Nicole's mother left at the restaurant where he worked, lay dead beside her. Blood was everywhere. On the walkway, the steps, and even a bloodied paw print from Nicole's dog. Police followed the evidence. Blood drops led from the crime scene to O.J. Simpson's estate, just 2 miles away. On June 17, 1994, O.J. was supposed to surrender to police. Instead, he disappeared. Hours later, millions watched as a white Ford Bronco driven by Simpson's friend Al Cowlings slowly moved down Interstate 405 with O.J. in the back seat, holding a gun to his own head. It was surreal. News anchors described it live. People gathered on overpasses waving signs, and networks cut into NBA Finals coverage to broadcast it. After nearly 2 hours, the Bronco finally returned to O.J.'s home. He surrendered, calm, exhausted, with a suicide note left behind. The world watched in stunned silence. Police and prosecutors believed the case was airtight. O.J.'s blood was found at the crime scene. Nicole's and Ron's blood was found in his Bronco. A bloody glove was found behind O.J. His guest house. It matched a second glove at the murder scene, a cut on O.J.'s finger, with his blood left along the sidewalk Bronco and inside his house. The bloody footprints matched his size. 12 Bruno Magli shoes. Rare and expensive shoes he denied owning, though photos later proved otherwise. But there was more than just forensic science in this case. There was race, celebrity, power, and mistrust of the LAPD. Simpson hired a team of powerhouse lawyers dubbed the Dream Team, led by Johnny Cochran, Robert Shapiro, F. Lee Bailey, and a then little-known Robert Kardashian. Their strategy? Turn the trial from a murder case into a trial of police corruption and racism. And they did it masterfully. The key witness, Detective Mark Furman, discovered the glove at O.J.'s home. But under cross-examination, Furman denied ever using racial slurs, only for the defense to reveal tapes where he used the N-word over 40 times. His credibility collapsed, and with it, the prosecution's narrative. Then came the most iconic moment of the trial. O.J. struggling to fit the bloody glove over his hand in front of the jury. Cochran seized the moment with the now famous line, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." After 9 months of testimony and more than 150 witnesses, the jury took less than 4 hours to reach a verdict. October 3, 1995. Millions watched live. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered. In workplaces and classrooms, people huddled around TVs, and then, not guilty. Gasps, cheers, sobs. The nation split in two. Some celebrated, seeing it as justice in a system that historically targeted black men. Others were horrified, convinced a murderer had walked free. Nicole's and Ron's families wept, and a stunned silence echoed across America. In 1997, the victims' families sued O.J. in civil court. This time, The standard was different. Preponderance of the evidence, not beyond reasonable doubt. O.J. was found liable for the wrongful deaths of Nicole and Ron and ordered to pay $33.5 million in damages. He never fully paid. Though it wasn't a criminal conviction, many saw it as the closest thing to justice they'd ever get. O.J. was now a pariah. His fortune faded. He was often seen playing golf, dodging media, and selling autographs, but he never stopped proclaiming his innocence. In 2007, he was arrested again, this time for armed robbery and kidnapping in Las Vegas, after trying to reclaim sports memorabilia. Ironically, he was sentenced to 33 years in prison, the same amount in millions he owed the Goldman family. He served 9 years before being released in 2017. The ghosts of the past never left. In 2006, he tried to publish a book titled If I Did It, a hypothetical confession. Public outcry was fierce and the book was shelved. Eventually, it was released under the control of the Goldman family, who added the subtitle, Confessions of the Killer. The question still haunts America. Was O.J. guilty? Was he framed by a racist cop? Was the jury swayed more by emotion and distrust than evidence? Legally, O.J. Simpson was acquitted, but to many, the mountain of circumstantial and forensic evidence pointed to one truth: he did it. To others, he was a black man targeted by a corrupt system, a symbol of how justice isn't always blind. The O.J. Simpson trial wasn't just about murder. It was about race, power, celebrity, media, and truth. It was a mirror held up to America, revealing deep cracks in its justice system and racial divide. Whether you believe he did it or not, one thing is certain: justice was put on trial, and the verdict is still being debated today.